Mr. Bishop seek recognition.
To speak on the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized.
And in response to the comments just made, I'm glad this comes together this way, because I've been wanting to knock down some canards and some straw men arguments that have been offered by the majority. But to that point, with the points just made by the gentleman from New York, who earlier made clear, because he said it literally, that he will use all means necessary to reverse the Supreme Court, not through the processes of the Supreme Court, but by changing it institutionally, by packing it, by getting rid of the filibuster, overriding institutional norms as usual. But to the point just argued, the central holding of Heller is that the Second Amendment confers an individual right. That is the core of Heller. It's what the left went berserk about, because you don't want that right to be recognized. Mr. Jones then comes forth, making my argument perhaps better than I can, saying that his main objective is to see to it that that individual right recognized in Heller no longer continues to apply.
Sir, will the gentleman yield?
Let me finish. No, I won't. You had a great opportunity there.
That you are now misconstruing.
The statement has been made by Mr. Cicilline, by Mr. Deutsch, by Mr. Jones, by the President of the United States, that the Second Amendment is not absolute, that it's not without limits. No one has contended that it is without limits. But Heller gives clear indications to what limits are permissible. You read from some of them. What is unlikely, and the Ninth Circuit case falls in the right resolution on that, the Fourth Circuit case earlier, the recognition by the dissent by Judge Wynn in the Fourth Circuit in the same case, is that 18 to 20-year-olds are covered by the Second Amendment first. And the second point is that bans of widely prevalent firearms and acquainted mechanisms are, you can't do that. Another thing Heller said you can't do is require people to lock them up in their homes so they can't be accessed to provide for their main purpose, which is the right of self-defense of home and hearth.
The gentleman yield.
No, I will not. I'm going to get this out so that somebody hears it. The President of the United States said the other day, the President said, another misnomer, or another factually inaccurate point, you couldn't buy a cannon when the Second Amendment was adopted. And actually it's false. It's been debunked repeatedly, but he keeps repeating it. So when you come in and say, we can't, I'm making the argument, you attribute to those of us on our side who are raising the question of the constitutionality of what you propose. I do not make the argument that the Second Amendment is absolute or unlimited. What I make the point about is Heller held what it held. McDonald held what it held. That was the Supreme Court of the United States. Do you acknowledge that baseline or do you not? Mr. Jones has made clear repeatedly that he does not. When we've raised these points about what other courts are deciding about the 18 to 20-year-olds being governed by being covered, they have a right under that amendment, number one. And number two, that some limitations are impermissible. And those you propose in this bill, 3 of them. I said 2 earlier, I was mistaken, 3. You want to ban a whole class of weapons to 18 to 20-year-olds, number one. Number 2, you want to impose the same kind of disabling requirement mandate in the home of weapons that Heller said is impermissible. And finally, you want to ban magazines that have the number that are predominant, that are prevalent everywhere in the country. Heller said you can't do that. So you've got to contend with why, at least if you say the Ninth Circuit, well, it's great for you guys to cite the Ninth Circuit, you don't respect the Ninth Circuit. Yeah, the Ninth Circuit is liberal. That's why it's so remarkable that even they have said that this is something that can't be done. You can't ban a class of weapons to people 18 to 20. So I'm glad to undertake things that we can do. Let's talk about them. But when you start talking about things you can't do, and then you couple that with statements that essentially say I'm going to get rid of the Second Amendment by any means necessary.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yeah, I'll yield to you.
What do you support? Like, what are you willing to do to stop the epidemic of gun violence in this country? Because you just referenced that, so I would love for you to articulate the efforts that you would be willing to undertake with your Democratic colleagues in this chamber today to stop the epidemic of gun violence in this country, sir.
You look at what's happening and then you actually do things that would address that.
So you're not going to answer the question because you don't actually have an approach other than to allow the status quo to remain?
Yeah, I wouldn't let teachers prop doors open. I would make sure that police are not discouraged from going in and saving children who are being assaulted while the assault is going on. I would not intimidate the police and tell them they ought to cease to exist. My time's expired.
I can translate that for you. He's willing to do nothing.
That sounds right to me.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?